The Social Screenwriters Podcast. The Social Screenwriters Podcast. The Social Screenwriters Podcast. Where Andy talks to people he met on the internet.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 40 of the Social Screenwriters Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Compton, and today on the show we have a very special guest. Her name is Shruti Saran. So, Shruti is an Indian-American TV writer, emerging filmmaker, and third culture kid. She writes across genres and loves edgy comedies and grounded sci-fi. She's written on a few different shows in comedy, drama, live action, and animation at Netflix and Amazon. Most recently, she was an ESE executive story editor for season 2 of Slip, a sci-fi comedy on Roku. Obviously early in her career, but already kind of quite accomplished. And I feel like the TV writers are going to get a lot out of this episode, something that I could never give to you because I'm not a TV writer. I'm more of a feature guy. But yeah, it was a great episode, and she is very smart and has a lot of cool experience and a really unique kind of origin story with how she got her start. And we talk about, what it's like to write in writers' rooms. Yeah, I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. If you like what you hear, if you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's one of those down there. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, say something smart Shruti said, say something dumb that I said. And if you're only listening, go to our social media, Instagram or Twitter at Social Writer Pod, tag us up, say something smart that Shruti said, say something dumb that I said. Whatever you want, just help spread the word, and if you want to donate to the show, you can do that too at Social Writer Pod. There's a Linktree link where you can donate. Really appreciate anything we can get. That's about it, guys. I'm going to let you hop into this episode with Shruti Saran. All right, Shruti Saran, it's so nice to have you on the show and meet you for the very first time over the internet. How's it going today?
It's going great. It's been sort of a weird day, but I'm ready to get into it.
Oh, heck yeah, let's do it. So yeah, we were just chatting a little bit about kind of where you're from and how you came to America. Born in England, did you say, or India?
I was actually born in India. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I was like 3, when I was very young, I moved to England, and then I moved to the United States as a kid. So just kind of moved around the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. A mostly American upbringing outside of like childhood experiences. That's like how my mom is. She was born in Okinawa, Japan, lived there until she was like 8 years old, and then grew up in San Diego. So it's like, from Japan, but, very much like accustomed to American lifestyle and all that.
Totally. Yeah. It's so weird because I feel like very American in my bones, but I realize when in talking to other people, or especially like in becoming a writer and like being really forced to like sort of like synthesize my life experiences, that it is different. Like it has like growing up in different countries and sort of like bopping around, like following my parents as they built their careers has affected my point of view and like totally impacted the way that I see the world. But I formative years in Missouri, as we were talking about, and Michigan.
Yeah, and for listeners who don't know, you probably know because I talk about it all the time, but I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been here most of my life. And Shruti, the first city you lived in when you came to America was Columbia, Missouri, which is like an hour from me. Small world, small country, right? That's super cool.
That's so crazy. You're in Missouri right now?
I'm still in Missouri. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I've been here most of my life like you. No, you were older, but I arrived here when I was very young. I was born in Michigan. My dad was in the military, so we moved around a bit. My older brothers moved around a ton, but by the time I got around, I was born in Michigan, Lansing, moved to North Carolina when I was like 1, and then by the time I was like 3 going on 4, we settled down in Missouri, and I've been here ever since. So we'll see if I end up leaving and coming to LA at some point. Which, don't let me forget, but one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you today you've been on a list of mine. It's just like kind of a cool person on Twitter that I wanted to talk to about screenwriting. But
Yes.
I saw after I messaged you about this, I saw the thread that you made about moving to LA and the advantages and disadvantages. And we'll totally dive into that too, because that's very interesting to someone like me. And I know there's a lot of writers who listen to this that aren't in LA and maybe are thinking about making the jump. And I just think it'd be cool to hear that firsthand experience.
Totally, totally. Yeah. Sometimes I go off on Twitter and I'm like, I'm either going to get totally dragged for this tweet thread or people are going to find it helpful. And I
Yeah,
never
no,
know which one it's going to be.
yeah, no, I thought yours was really helpful and cool, and like, yeah, I think people get into trouble when I mean, it can happen to a person who's just making a reasonable statement, and some
Yeah.
fucking weirdo is like, "Hey, what do you mean by that?" You know, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But but then I think that you were approaching it not from a like a high horse position of like, this is why you need to be in LA to make it. And you were just like, this is my experience, and if that helps you, then cool. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And I hate to see someone.
I do
Yeah,
try to choose my words carefully for sure.
it's a very toxic place, that website. You see people getting
Yeah.
dragged for like nothing, and you're like,
Yeah.
what is going
One
on?
of my, one of my favorite tweets, some guy was like, Twitter is so crazy. You can literally be like, the sky is blue, and somebody will be like, this bitch doesn't know what night is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's so true too. It's insane. Or I saw one that was like, you tweet pancakes are really good, and someone's like, oh, I guess waffles are just,
Yeah.
total bullshit. And it's like, that's not what I said. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's such a weird place. But especially the screenwriting side of it's such a niche subculture where people just uh have nothing better to do at times than talk about, the classic bolted slug lines is one that everyone talks about, or, there's been a million. When do you what do you capitalize in your action lines? Is it only sounds? Is it important moments? Is it this? Is it that? And like everyone just has a take. And I'm pretty much a believer of like, if you write well, none of that matters. You can do whatever you want, kind of. But the story has to be engaging. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this industry, I think, is so scary because there are no rules at the end of the day.
Mhm,
And there's no like structure and there's no path.
mhm.
And that really, I think that's really intimidating, but it's also really freeing because
Yeah.
you don't have to like go to school and get this degree, and only then can you be a screenwriter. Like you can come at it from different ways, and you can play to your strengths if you figured out what they are.
Definitely. Yeah, I know it is. You're right. It's half intimidating and half like liberating. I totally agree with that. Okay, so before we get too much into that stuff, I do just want to take it back. And the first thing I want to ask you, Shruti, is how did you get into screenwriting? I kind of saw it in your bio on your website, and it's a pretty interesting story where you wrote your first original pilot. At what point in your
Yeah.
life you were at. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell us how you got into screenwriting?
Yeah. So I mean, I gave you a little background already. I was born in India.
Mhm,
Like moved to England when I was very young, and then I moved to the United States when I was like 8.
mhm,
Kind of collecting weird accents as my parents collected advanced degrees.
mhm,
And in college, I studied biology and biochem. So my original plan was to be some kind of like doctor or scientist. And I sort of started backpedaling on that plan, I would say, towards the end of college because I realized that I inconveniently hated hospitals.
mhm,
And at the same time, I had met this guy like very serendipitously, like one day in New Jersey,
mhm,
and fell in love with
mhm,
him.
mhm.
And he was a physicist. He lived in Texas and was getting his PhD in physics at UT. So after 2 years of dating him long distance, I moved to Texas to be near my now husband.
Yeah.
And I started working in startups. Like my last job, my last like day job was at a digital marketing agency as an analyst for pharmaceutical clients. I think because I had like a science background that kind of just fell into that. But I knew that I didn't want that to be the rest of my life. And I had also sort of like, I don't know, moving to Austin. Austin is kind of like a fun creative city. And so I had started like dabbling in improv and like doing a little bit of stand up and like, writing sketch comedy and like doing all this stuff that I hadn't really let myself do in Michigan, where I went to college, where I was pre-med and like my identity was that of like a pre-med science person.
Sure.
And I was also kind of getting really obsessed with half-hour sitcoms and wanted to like I was obsessed with Community. I think Community was the first show that I was watching and I was just like, oh my God, somebody's writing this. Like, how are they doing this? How are they doing multiple storylines and like weaving them together? And
the amount of jokes.
Yes, and then on top of that, like the joke density of your average episode of Community is just so high, and I was just like flabbergasted and kind of set out to demystify the sitcom for myself by writing specs. And the first spec that I wrote was a Community spec, and that I wrote that spec like long before I had kind of come around to the realization that I wanted to be a television writer. But that was like that was me kind of dipping the toes in.
Sure.
But I kept working in Austin until finally my husband was sort of at a crossroads in his career. He's an entrepreneur, and he wanted to figure out his next venture, basically. And he's like a software guy. And I think he was also just like tired of like being behind a computer all day. So he told me that he wanted to move to the woods and build a cabin. And he'd spent like months kind of ideating on this cabin. Like he had designed this cabin in SketchUp, which is like the poor man's version of CAD. And
is that like some kind of like architecture program? I don't know what that is. Okay, yeah, cool.
It's like it's like architecture software where you can design blueprints basically.
Yeah, awesome.
So he had the house that he wanted to build. He had the cabin that he wanted to build. Kind of. It was sort of I hate saying tiny house because it makes me seem like a crazy prepper homesteader. But this is my truth, so I might as well just like lean into it.
Yeah.
And I was also like thinking about being a screenwriter and like trying to write on nights and weekends. But I think honestly looking to pivot. So when he said this, I sort of jumped at the opportunity because I wanted to leave my job. I wanted an excuse to leave my job. And I wanted to reorganize my life around writing. And I wanted to do all these things. I just hadn't had the courage to do them. And I also knew that like this probably wasn't something that we would be able to do in the future. We were in our 20s, like we had a lot more flexibility than I have even now. So we did it. We moved to the woods and we spent like the next few months, almost a year, building this house by hand together, just the two of us. And then occasionally our friends would come up and help with like big pushes. It was like a ridiculous year. I don't think we would have done this without our friends because we have a couple friends who work in construction, so they were able to help us. But it was a lot of honestly like watching YouTube and being like, how do you frame a house? And then framing the house and like, how do you do the floor and like doing the floor and like, how do you install hardy board and like,
that's a lot.
So we did that, and I kind of used my downtime from manual labor to write my first pilot. And then came back to Austin after this year and, reintegrated into urban life but sort of at a different tempo, and like reorganized my life around screenwriting basically. And then did that for years until I wrote the scripts that got me reps and finally staffed and brought me to LA.
That's awesome. Do you remember how many years it was from the cabin until like you started getting in your foot in the door in the industry?
Yeah, so we built the cabin in 2000. We built like half a cabin. It's still not
Uh,
done. Still not done.
yeah, yeah.
We built the cabin in like 2015 or 2016, and
Uh,
I staffed in 2021.
okay, yeah. So a good 4 or 5 years, five, maybe
Yeah.
6. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
The only reason I asked that is like for everyone on their journey, you know what I mean? It's very easy for us to be like, am I taking forever? I see people on Twitter having success so quickly sometimes. And I just like putting that out there because for me, I'm hopefully going to be working on my first feature, this like directing a feature, hopefully this year, maybe next year, I don't know, but it's getting close to that. But I'm like 8 years in, I think, or like 7. So and it just takes a while, you know.
Yeah.
We have in common that you were doing improv and stand up and stuff. I also did some of that like in like 2017, 18, 19, before the pandemic hit. And you know, being so tuned into comedy, as I'm sure you are as well, like a lot of comedians, you know, from the time you do your first open mic, you have to work diligently and consistently. And even then, it's going to be 7 to 10 years before you're like, you know, possibly making like a decent career out of this. Like it really just takes a long time for most people. Just want to throw that out there to maybe put some people at ease if it's taking you a long time and you feel like you're in year 4 or 5 of just, you know, entering contests and all these things and nothing's really happening. Keep going because you're probably getting really close.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it takes like 10 to 15 years, no matter how you slice it.
Hmm.
And the people who go faster usually were doing something like screenwriting adjacent before, like they were either journalists
Yep.
or they went to film school and then like took a little bit of a break. Like I feel
Hmm.
like when you count up the years where people were sort of working towards this, it's always 10 years. Even for me,
Yep.
between between cabin and staffing
Hmm.
might have just been like 5 or 6 years, but I was still thinking about this stuff before I had written 4 specs before I wrote an original pilot. I just had this
Yeah.
like failure to launch on
Yeah. Yeah.
original material, and specs were easier. So I would keep writing a spec while
Hmm.
failing to write an original pilot, write another
Hmm.
spec while failing to write an original pilot. And
Yeah.
those specs taught me a lot, but as far as pushing my career forward, they were really useless.
Hmm.
Because no, nobody wants to read specs, and I knew
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Gone are the days of specs getting you in the room. Now it's original ideas. But you didn't go to film school, correct? You went to your biochem program, but never like a film school.
I
Yeah.
studied biology and
Yeah.
biochem in undergrad, and
So yeah,
that
those specs are your
that's it.
film school, really. Like they're your screenwriting courses of like, you know, yeah, you're not making original content yet, but like I think it's easier when you have a blueprint of how a TV show you love especially is supposed to go. That
Yeah.
yeah, it just makes it a little easier. I joke about this all the time on the podcast because everyone makes fun of the book Save the Cat. But that really opened my mind when I read Save the Cat because before that I was writing just free writing with no outline. I didn't really understand story structure yet. And I was
Hmm.
just winging it, you know, and improvising a little bit every day on the page. And once I read that book, it was like, oh, now I have a roadmap. Now, like at least it's almost like a fill in the blank thing when you read like that Save the Cat beat sheet of like, here, this should kind of be happening in your story. And then you move on to this section, and then you're at the midpoint, and this should be like this. It just gave me a blueprint. And I think like with writing TV specs, maybe it's similar of like at least you know the structure, you know the blueprint, and it can just allow you to like dip your toes in the water, as you said, and just even get started. It's so hard to get started as a screenwriter. And sometimes I think now that I've been doing it for a while, I kind of forget just how hard it is to go in as a complete blank slate. It's just so overwhelming.
Absolutely. It's so hard. It's
Yeah.
so hard. I try to remember how hard it is because I think the further you go, the more removed you are from the feeling of being a beginner. And
Hmm.
I have to remember that feeling because I think it helps me empathize with people who are just getting started. It is
Hmm.
so hard. There's so many problems you have to solve. And only one of those problems is how do I finish a script that is good?
Yeah.
There's so many other there are so many other parts of being a screenwriter. And I think like developing community and finding people who will like read your work and give you feedback are
Mm.
almost harder problems to solve than writing the dang thing. And
Mm.
writing the dang thing is already so fucking hard.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But then, like you said, finding people who will read your work, and like you realize early on, it's a lot of trial and error of like getting notes from someone and having that really awkward moment reading their notes, like, oh, they don't get me at
Yeah,
all. And how am I going to
right.
talk about, how am I going to reply to this email? It takes a little bit to find your tribe and find your people, but it's a necessary thing. And then the whole thing of like, what is a manager? What is an agent? I thought those were the same thing. What do they do? And just I noticed I had already been writing for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years when I got a manager. And once I got a manager, it was like cracking open another 50% of this world that now I have to learn the industry side and how the business actually works. Because it's not just dreaming up this great script and typing fade out and sending it out, and now someone wants to make it. And it's tough. People are looking for different things. There's mandates and all that stuff, and there's so much strategy that you can try to brainstorm up and how to get something made. Do we go to a star first and get that star attachment, and then we're rolling, or do we find a producer who's really smart, and blah 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 blah. We could talk forever about it, but I remember the overwhelming feeling of being like, I have a manager, I'm in the door, I kind of know a lot about this stuff, and realizing that I didn't know anything pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, it's yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to make
Agree.
this super depressing up top about how hard this is. That's I tend to do that in conversations. No, but anyway, yeah. I could dwell on that all day, and I won't force you to, because I want to force you to do another awkward thing. I want you to tell me, how would you describe your brand?
Uh, okay. I
Yeah,
hate this
yeah,
part.
I know we're doing it.
Um, all right. Well, I guess I kind of described how it's been like a pretty winding journey to TV, but like that journey has I think informed my perspective as a writer because of I mean I started out in comedy. I wrote a bunch of comedy specs and then pilots before I ever tried my hand at drama.
Mhm.
So I still really just like love high concept comedies. But I staffed my first staff job was a genre show, and the script that like sort of like got me a manager and an agent and all that was a drama.
Mhm.
So now I'm like very much a multi-genre writer. Um, and but as far as like what I write specifically, I think I'm really drawn to stories about characters who are trying to make like big changes in their lives and maybe like questioning their belief systems or feeling stuck between what is expected of them and what they want for themselves. Like a lot of my characters are kind of grappling with ambition or like grappling with some big idea. And I think that's kind of the thing that's like pulled me away from comedy, because as much as I love comedy and as much as I love sort of high concept comedies, and I think you can explore a lot through comedy, a lot of the ideas that I have actually lend themselves really well to like grounded sci-fi.
Mhm.
But no matter what, I think levity it is sort of a through line in both of my comedies and dramas. I like things to be like a little funny and a little light,
Mhm.
because I think that's life.
Yeah, yeah, I have a similar thing going on, and I think it's a real gift if you want to dip your toes into genre down the line. And because if you can develop those story skills for dramatic storytelling, but your roots are in just cracking a couple jokes here and there, blending
Mm-hmm.
those together is so good. Like when you see a horror movie where the jokes are actually really landing, but they're not
Yes.
overwhelming, they're just tasteful and
Yes.
perfect. It just amplifies everything. Or a dramatic
Yeah.
story,
Totally.
same
Or
kind of
like
thing.
exactly. Like comedy is used to break the tension, or yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
100%. I
Yeah. And
love it. I love it.
sometimes you see stuff where you're like, like the jokes aren't really
Yeah.
just saying that, like, yeah, if you come from comedy, learning, if you already know how to tell a joke or write a joke, craft a joke, if you can learn dramatic storytelling skills to go with that, like it's just going to be, you're going to be killing it, in my opinion. Because story's tough, you know, like, and not every funny person can tell a dramatic story, and then vice versa, you know, and you don't need jokes to tell a great dramatic story, obviously. But for my taste, I just love it.
Yeah. There's also nothing worse than like a dramatic story that's too self-serious.
Yeah.
I just feel myself like groaning internally. Like sometimes it works, but yeah, if people can see the humor in the situation, I think if your characters can see the humor in the situation, I think that's always like
Yeah,
tops.
totally. I know. And I think I've just never been that serious of a person. And I find it difficult to write a very serious story that has no levity. I just can't do it. I'm like, I have to poke fun at it at some point and let people know that I'm not trying to take myself this serious. There is a time for it for sure. But anyway, okay, cool. Let's talk about like how you write. So since everyone's writing routine is unique, can you describe to me your regular writing routine? Like, do you write in the morning? Do you write late at night? Do you write on the couch, at a desk, in your bed? What's it usually like whenever you go to write?
I try to get up and write. I like get up, make coffee. I get up, do the dishes, make coffee while the coffee is heating up, and then I try to sit down at my desk and start writing. I'm kind of like one of those people who, if I fuck up my morning, then I feel like the rest of my day is fucked. But like if I get something kind of hard done in the morning, then I feel like the rest of the day is better.
Is that part of waking up and doing the dishes immediately? Like
I just can't do the dishes. I can't do the dishes at night. Oh yeah. Is it like a small win to start my day?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just can't do the dishes at night. I feel like it's really inefficient, especially right now that I'm at home because I'm not like on a staff. I think it's really inefficient to like do the dishes as you go along in your day. I don't know what kind of psychopaths do that. So I just like let them pile up and I do them in the morning because otherwise they get out of control and I don't want to do them in the evening. So that's just like
that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And the evening is for chilling, you know, like,
the evening is for chilling.
Yeah. I'll work tomorrow.
It's not like dead time because I'm boiling water for the French press. So if I do the dishes while the water's boiling and the French press is brewing,
it's time management.
Totally efficient. Yeah.
Yep, totally. Yeah.
But yeah, then I sit down at my desk. I work here in my office usually most of the time.
Awesome. Cool. Let's see. So let's talk about your process. Like, let's say you have a brand new idea. Do you jump directly into an outline? Do you try to brainstorm up like a simple log line? Do you need a title before you can write? I'm a psycho, and for some reason I need a title. And like a cool font. I don't know. It's all procrastination for me, but I'm weird like that. Or do you just jump in and start writing pages? I've met a lot of writers who do that. What's it usually like for you when you have a brand new idea?
I think a lot of times ideas for me will come about as a result of a conversation with a smart friend. So a lot of times I need to like sort of talk about an idea with someone, often some like just another writer or someone in my writers group usually. And they'll help me sort of find what is interesting about the idea or confirm that it's interesting at all. And I'm not just kind of obsessed with something that nobody cares about.
Sure.
Or they'll help me sort of like talk about how the idea could be more timely so that the script feels timely. And then I'll go brainstorm. I might like read a bunch of stuff. I might write a bunch of stuff. I try to start on paper so that I can like think non-linearly. And then I'll write a one page. And then after that, I'm really methodical. I have a writers group that I've been working with for 5 years.
Oh, amazing.
And I meet with them 3 times a week, 3 times a month. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, damn, you guys are committed.
Yeah. No, 3 times a month, basically every week with a little wiggle room. So I I'll usually just like bring things into them. I'll bring the one page into them. I'll get notes. I'll bring a treatment in. I'll bring an outline. And after, I'm a pretty methodical writer. And
Mhm.
honestly, working in television has made me even more methodical because um, TV is that's how you write in TV, and it has sort of trained my personal process.
Yeah, definitely. So when you write a one page, are you writing the entirety of the story, like beginning, middle, and end, all on a single page? Like, uh, I would find that so difficult to do as the first thing. But is that usually what you're doing? Just because one pages are the death of me.
Yeah.
I find it so hard to summarize it. But I guess if you're writing a one page when the script is already written, it's much harder than starting with a one page because you don't have all the bullshit that you put into the finished script that you're trying to like choose what's important, what you need
Yeah.
to cut out. But is that usually what it is? It's the entirety of the story at that point in the idea process.
Yeah, I think we might have to like define our terms here
Okay.
because when you're saying a one page, what
Hmm.
I think that the one page that you write after you finish the feature or whatever,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
after you finish the pilot, to
Hmm.
me is very much a selling tool that
Hmm.
you are giving to people
Yeah,
to get them excited about your project. The
totally.
one page that I write
Hmm.
before starting a project is just something like
Uh-huh.
it's an internal document that I can bring to my writers group
Yes.
and be
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be like, eh.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
no
kind of
pressure.
yeah, no pressure.
Yeah.
It's usually just like, hey guys, I'm thinking it doesn't say hey guys. It's not a letter, but it's
Yeah.
like this is the idea. It's going to be like a 1 hour drama.
Mhm.
Um
Oh, cool. So you kind of are
and
speaking like as the author too. It's not just talking about what's happening in the plot of it all, but rather like talking about tone and like things like
yes,
that. Okay, cool,
very
cool, cool.
much. Half of it is just like structure, tone,
Yeah.
themes, why I want to write this,
Hmm.
what I think it could be about.
Uh-huh.
And then like just like a broad strokes story, which
Hmm.
is usually like, this is act one. And then, stuff happens. And then I figure it out. And then maybe this is how it will end. And then I'll bring it in and they'll be like, this is bad. And like, I just go from there.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the ending ends with a question mark, and then this is how it'll end. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
not a very much like an internal document.
sure, sure. I love that. I bet it's crazy helpful too. I should maybe start dabbling in that instead of trying to just write titles all day. So on average, how long does it take you for a first draft to be completed? Let's say, like, are you writing more half hours or 1 hours right now?
Right now I'm writing more 1 hours.
Okay, so
Um,
like, yeah, a 1 hour, like from the time you realize you have an idea to like typing, fade out or the end or however you end a script. Well, I guess pilots don't end. That's the feature land. But like until you finish the 1 hour pilot, how long does it usually take you to go from idea generation to finishing a pilot? A 1 hour.
it's so hard to answer this question because I'm always working on multiple things at the same time, but
For sure.
probably from, the inception of the idea and including all the research and stuff to kind of a polished draft, probably at least 6 months,
Hmm.
give or take.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very fair amount of time. Some people seem like they get done so quick, and it
Yeah.
it it does matter, I think, to include a polished draft, like not just the first draft that you don't really want anyone to read outside of maybe the writers group. But yeah, 6 months is very fair. I think that's kind of me for a feature as well, maybe a little longer, especially if we're talking polished. Because I got to go through quite a few rounds of notes to really start thinking that things are really getting solid. But cool. 6 months is very fair. Um, and then when your first draft is complete, let's say first draft, um, what is the first thing are you doing? Are you sending it to your writers group? Are you kind of talking out loud with your husband about it? Are you just maybe throwing it into a contest or a coverage service or anything? I don't know if you still do that stuff. Probably not if you've been staffed. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't no contests anymore, but
Yeah.
I used to submit to like the 5 or 6 ones that I thought were kind of worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and now it's so I bring my writers group everything. I'm
Hmm.
cripplingly dependent on my writers group. If
Hmm.
they if my writers group decides to break up, I don't know what my system would be. But
Yeah.
yeah, so right now um like they have they have been reading everything. Like they've been
Hmm.
reading everything from that first little vomit of a one page to
Hmm.
the first crappy draft to like the polished draft. And then usually when my writers group is like, this is ready for prime time, I'll give it to my agent.
Yeah. Awesome. So I don't know how much you can say because I noticed that you didn't specify on Twitter, but you have been in rooms for Netflix and for Amazon. Um, we don't have to talk too much about the shows, but I was just wondering, like, what was your first room like? How did that gig come about for you? Just, is whatever you do feel like you can say would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, so my first gig came about through Twitter.
Hmm.
Basically, I had well, my first like big gig. I had a few like kind of small paid opportunities before that, but my first staff job came through Twitter.
Hmm.
It's a genre show at Netflix that is still unannounced.
Hmm.
And I got it because I was introduced to a showrunner through Twitter, and they read the 1 hour drama that got me reps, and they were like, "This is pretty good. Send me like," and they kind of honestly just took it upon themselves to keep in touch because I would not have bothered them if they hadn't.
Hmm.
But a couple months later, they reached out again and were like, "Hey, like, what's up? Like, what's new in your room?" They basically, I think they were on production for their previous show, so like every time they'd come up for air, they'd shoot me an email, which was like really lovely.
Yeah.
But they read a second script and they were like, you're ready to staff on a show. And if I
Hmm.
get a show, I'll put you on my short list. I can't guarantee anything, but you're on my short list.
Hmm.
And then like a month later, they got a show, and I actually helped them staff that show,
Hmm.
and then was a staff writer on that show.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a really
those.
weird, really weird story, and I don't know anybody else who broke in this way. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, those
That's
Twitter relationships though, they can matter sometimes. Like just being present on social media sometimes can just put you out into the world. That's like, social media can seem silly a lot, we're all just like, look at me, look at how I'm living my
yeah,
life.
yeah,
But I always say, like, especially to screenwriters who are like me in like Missouri or like in Ohio or Virginia or something, that no one's gonna know who you are or that you're trying to achieve this dream if you don't tell them. And sometimes you
yeah.
just got to put yourself out there and just be like, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it in this industry that's very far from where I am right now. And it can help sometimes. And like Twitter was when I got a manager, I just like kind of went deep in the nickel a little bit. And someone from Roadmap Writers just reached out to me. I didn't pay them any money or anything. And they were like, hey, yeah, we follow your tweets and think you're funny. And uh, saw that you went deep in the nickel. Can we do anything to help you? And I was like, I mean, yeah, I'm taking some manager meetings and stuff. I really want to find a manager. And they ended up linking me up with my now manager. And we had a meeting and it went great. So, like, that all came from Twitter. If I wasn't on Twitter and talking about little wins here and there, it wouldn't have happened. And it sounds similar for you, like, just being there, being out there, it helps sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I was like you. I was living in Texas at the time. I will
Mm-hmm.
say it was kind of a strange time because it was it was like mid-pandemic and
Yeah,
everybody was chronically online. And I think people were just more receptive and open to those kind of relationships
sure.
than they maybe are now when the industry is in a very different place. There are a bunch of unemployed writers in LA, and nobody is looking on the internet to hire people,
Mhm.
like to hire people. Like there are people here who like are ready and have the work and like
Yep.
desperately need to be staffed.
That's a very fair
Um,
point.
yeah, so I think the situation has changed,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but like at the time, like that was the climate, and I was able to take advantage of it.
Mhm,
And I found an advocate via
mhm,
Twitter. That is
mhm,
also actually how I got my manager, kind of the same way you did. Joey Tuccio from Roadmap Writers reached
mhm.
out after I semifinaled at the Austin Film Festival and was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, it seems like this script is doing well
Mhm,
in contests. Like like if you can I read it, and if you want, I'll set you up with some manager meetings the next time you come out to Los Angeles."
mhm,
And at that time, I had been coming out to LA like a couple times a year. So
mhm.
basically, the next time I came out, I was like, "Hey, I'm here." Like,
Yeah.
if that offer still stands, I would love to meet anybody who you feel would like the script.
Mhm. Yeah, that's amazing. And then yeah, I guess this is a nice time to segue into like, your experience with going from Texas to LA and what kind of a difference it made for you as a writer, just being where everything is happening.
Um, yeah, I mean, it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I'm here. I had
Hmm.
a really hard. It was a difficult move for me to make because I had a partner who was unable to move.
Hmm.
Um, so it's really it's hard when you're married to like you have to make these decisions with two people in mind.
Hmm.
But again, like during the pandemic, his company went from being based in Austin to being remote.
Hmm.
And so when I moved, which was right at the end of the pandemic, he
Hmm.
was also like all of a sudden more flexible.
Cool.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I moved out here for I moved out here for a staff job, so it was like that first year was pretty chaotic because I was working a lot while also trying to get my bearings in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
But I was also like gainfully employed and like had a reason to like get up every morning and
Yeah.
be spending um, the money required to like live in the city. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I think it was good, and I also like met a bunch of people really fast. Um,
Yeah.
and I was also like kind of familiar with the city already because, like I said, I had been coming out here for quite a few years,
Hmm.
um, just to meet people. So
Hmm.
I was like very much like, yeah, I mean, I had been coming out to LA. I just hadn't like lived here for an extended period of time.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it feels like for TV writers, it's like pretty much a necessity to come to LA, depending on what kind of TV you're writing. I guess New York works too if you were going to work on like an SNL or like a late night show or something that
Yeah,
films there. But I feel like
totally.
the majority of narrative storytelling is probably happening in LA, and that's kind of the thing. I feel like feature writers, like I'm a feature writer, I feel like you can get away with not being in LA. And that was what my manager told me during the pandemic. I was signed right at the end of 2021. So we were still very much in it. And he was like, don't worry about it right now. You're fine because the industry, as you said, this is how it is right now. And I think it's totally fine. But now that we're kind of creeping out of the pandemic, kind of starting to think, even as a feature writer, how much would it benefit me to be in Los Angeles, and just being able to actually like show face and, hang out with people. It's Zoom is fine, but Zoom is, it's still kind of, it's not quite as personal as, hanging out with someone in real life. So I'm starting to have that internal debate with myself too, and I haven't seen a big enough payday yet that would, allow me to move to LA right now. I have friends who moved to LA just, to chase the career, but didn't have a job lined up necessarily. And, more power to you. But like, I'm weary about doing that because I wonder just like, how many serving gigs am I going to take just to like, try to get by? And am I better off in Missouri? But anyway, I guess all I'm trying to say is, yeah, it's a tough decision for writers to make because it is a very expensive city. And you don't want to cut into all of your writing time or filmmaking time or whatever with needing to have like a demanding day job.
Yeah, there are a lot of trade-offs. I think
Yeah.
people think that they will come to LA and like magic will happen. Like it's like they'll land an assistant gig on a show and then they'll get staffed and serendipity. But I think it's probably like, I think the industry has gotten much more competitive over the past few years, and it
Mhm.
probably it's important to be strategic.
Definitely. Yeah. What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned in your first writer's room gig?
How to pitch.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I was so obsessed with getting staffed on a television show, and I was digesting so much information and listening to so many podcasts about what it's like to be in a writer's room. So
Hmm.
very little about the writer's room experience actually surprised me. I kind of
Hmm.
knew what it was going to be like going in, and I also had a relationship with the showrunner, so I knew them. And I helped staff the room, so there was a little bit of a ramp up there,
Hmm.
but I had not had a lot of practice pitching
Hmm.
story, except for in maybe like a little bit in my writers group. And even
Hmm.
that, like, it's just, you aren't doing it at the pace that you are in a writer's room, in an actual
Yeah.
writer's room. So yeah, I think pitching and like landing pitches,
Hmm.
like pitching in a compelling way,
Hmm.
kind of like, yeah, like figuring out how to keep up with the river that is a writer's room from day to day was the biggest lesson.
Yeah, I can imagine how intimidating that is because I'm like currently how you probably were back then. My pitching skills have so much room to grow still, and I know that. I hate whenever you're pitching and you can just feel yourself rambling, and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
so far from
Yeah.
what this story actually is, and
Yeah.
what the heart of it actually is. I'm just talking about shit that doesn't matter. But and I've done that in like a couple of roadmap pitches that I've been invited to over Zoom, where man, it's a different beast when many eyes are on you and ears are on you. And I can only imagine doing that in a room of veteran writers that I look up to and just being like, oh my
Totally.
God, this is
Yeah.
so scary. So you helped staff that room for your first writer's room gig. That's super interesting to me. And is that typical that like a brand new writer would help in the staffing process?
No.
Yeah,
No.
right.
This is like I said, this is a really weird story. And when I tell it to other people, they are stunned.
Yeah.
This is a weird break-in story.
Yeah, because I'm very far removed from like the television side and how that all works, but I would imagine like yeah, to a veteran TV writer, that's like what? Because even to
Yeah.
me, that raised not a red flag, but it raised like a flag of like, whoa, really? That's
Red flag.
insane. Not a red flag, not a
Like
red
red
flag.
flag,
No,
red flag.
no. It's like a maroonish purple. It's a very pleasant color,
Yeah.
but
No, it's true, Andy. I am a red flag. Just a walking,
just a
talking red flag. Yeah.
for sure, definitely. That'll be the sound bite that I advertise this with.
Yeah. I think it worked out because the this particular showrunner had just they were in between shows. They had just promoted their assistant,
Hmm.
so they no longer had an assistant. So I kind of and they knew that like I didn't have a ton of experience being an assistant on a television show.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of like I don't know. I'm not gonna. It was. I don't know that it was a test, but they sent me a couple scripts a couple months before the room started, and were like, "Hey, like, what do you think of these scripts?" And I read them. There were three of them, and I was like, "I like this one. I don't like this one, and I think this one is okay." You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they were sort of like, "That's exactly what I think. Like, it seems like we have the same taste.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to help me staff the show?" So
Cool. That's
that's
awesome. You passed the
that's
test.
kind of yeah. So it was a test. It turns
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, we had one of those
But
type of thing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but well, all that to say, it was also like an incredible gift because I think when you haven't broken into television yet, you're even at this point. Like I was repped, I had an agent, a manager, and a lawyer, but
Mm-hmm.
I had not read a lot of scripts. I didn't know what a sample looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was coming from agencies. Like I didn't know what staffing samples looked like.
Sure.
And, over the course of like a month or so, I read, um, you know, like maybe like 150 staffing samples. So all of a
Wow.
sudden I had, yeah, by the end of it, I had like a very good idea of like what it takes to get submitted for jobs, like what kind of scripts get submitted for jobs, what
Mm-hmm.
other staffed writers have as their what other staffed writers are leading with as far as like TV samples go.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was just really helpful because I felt like I was still very much on the outside looking in. And it also just helped build my confidence. Like I,
Yeah.
didn't like it's after you read that many scripts, it kind of erases any imposter syndrome that you
Mhm.
have because you're like, oh, yes, my scripts are my scripts are totally fine. Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is
I'm doing
what,
okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that and talking about your spec writing before you wrote a pilot being film school, I mean, holy shit, that's a film course right there. That's reading 150 actual samples from agencies. Because that's a hard part of it too. We're also in our bubble when you're coming up trying to be a screenwriter
right,
that it's like, yeah, I know what my scripts look like. And for me, it was I know what my classmates scripts look like. I know what some of my peers look like that friends I've made online that, I've read the writing. But what does it look like at, the actual staffing level? Like, what are
right.
those scripts like? That's just sounds like such a valuable experience that you got.
Yeah, it was a total gift. It was a
Yeah.
huge gift.
Cool, cool. All right, so let's jump away from screenwriting. I want to know what are some of your hobbies outside of screenwriting besides building cabins? We've established that one. But then what are some other hobbies that you have that help keep you sane?
I picked up tennis during the strike.
Oh, nice.
That's kind of like an old new hobby. I played in high school, and then during the strike, a fellow writer reached out and asked if I wanted to play,
Hmm.
and I was really tired of walking in circles around traffic cones,
For
and
sure.
so we started playing a couple of times a week, and
Mhm.
um, that's that's kind of like that's like a that's my big hobby outside of
Yeah.
writing right now.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, I love having a hobby where you kind of can get outside and get moving and
Yeah.
get the blood flowing because so much of our lives is spent sitting at a desk trying to write.
Oh my God.
I
It
think
made me
it's yeah.
love LA. Like LA
Mhm.
weather is perfect for playing tennis year round. And I don't think I truly appreciated LA until it was December and I was outside playing tennis.
What is the like average temperature like in December in LA?
I don't know, like 65.
God, that'd be so nice. That's actually
Yeah.
my favorite weather is like 65, like
Yeah.
70, 65. Yeah, I'm an old skateboarder now, but I've grown up my whole life skating and that's kind of my thing
Nice.
I've held on to. And all the skateboarders flock to Los Angeles because it's just beautiful weather all year round. And yeah, it's nice. Here in the winter, all the skateboarders kind of shut down or go to indoor skate parks and stuff like that. And it's just not the same. You're just
Yeah, I
breathing
can't.
in dust and shit. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
It gets cold in Missouri. Even
Yeah.
Austin. Austin gets so unbearably hot in the summer that you
Yeah.
can't do anything outside. But LA is just, man, it's just like perfect year round. And until I started playing tennis, I didn't really appreciate it. And now I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Okay, so I'm gonna make you pick one of your babies. Of the scripts that you've written, which is your favorite and why?
Yeah. Hmm. I think my favorite script currently, it's always like my baby's always the thing that I'm working on,
Of
but
course, yeah.
my favorite script that's done is probably the half hour that got me staffed.
Hmm.
It's called Bad Gandhi.
Hmm.
It is a stoner comedy about a young Gandhi just trying to be Gandhi, like Gandhi before he was Gandhi,
Yeah.
like
Oh my God.
Gandhi when he was like 21 and trying to get a job and figure his life out.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so good.
that script changed my life, and
Hmm.
I still love it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's like
yeah.
this. I would love to make that show.
It sounds like a show that needs to be made. I'm surprised that it hasn't been because that's a great pitch. I love that.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what is a recent accomplishment that you're proud of? It could be screenwriting related. It doesn't have to be. It could be tennis related if you wanted.
A recent accomplishment.
Yep.
I
You
don't
got
know
to
that this
brag about
is
yourself.
okay. Well, this isn't like super recent, but I'm going to go back to my writers group again.
Uh-huh.
Like my writers group and I just got we just reached our 5 year anniversary,
That's huge.
which, um, yeah, which like feels amazing. I don't think a lot of writers groups last this long.
No,
We've had,
I've been in two or three and none of them made it past like a year.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had like a lot of success stories. When we started, everyone was just like in Austin, not working in the industry. And now kind of half of us are working. And I feel like the rest of us are sort of on the cusp.
Hmm.
So that feels like a community that I've really helped build and like
Yeah.
cultivate. And it makes me happy. It also keeps me super sane out
Yeah.
here because those relationships, I think because they preceded like money and jobs and career just feel really authentic
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
like
for sure. Yeah, that's important to hold on to those kind of people in your life. Um, all right, and we have reached the final question, Shruti. I would
okay.
love to know. We've kind of talked about it throughout the episode a little bit, but I'm going to ask you one more time. What are a few words of advice that you would give to your fellow screenwriters out there, especially to those just getting started?
Um gosh, this question is always it's so broad that my mind goes blank.
Yeah, that's
But
okay. If there's a 40-minute pause, I can cut that right out.
yeah, yeah, you can get rid of all my rambling. Just please make
Hmm.
me sound smart, Andy.
I will try my
Um
best. I have to do it for myself every episode, I
I
swear.
I I feel like people should be okay, so I feel like we live in a world where you feel like so okay, so going back to what we were saying before, like you do have to like grow your shit and show your shit. Like you do ultimately have to like put your stuff out there. You can't just like you can't write in a vacuum.
Hmm.
Um I, However, I feel like a lot of times people who are just starting out
Hmm.
feel like they're under so much pressure to be like public facing,
Hmm.
um, that um, they start like sort of promoting themselves and their work too early, I would
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like I feel
Hmm.
like people need to let themselves just like be a student for a while
Hmm.
and learn how to write screenplays if they want to be writers. Because
Hmm.
this is a really like esoteric and specific craft.
Hmm.
And like whatever there's a lot of luck involved with building a screenwriting career, and there's a lot of structural inequities, and like Hollywood is not fair, but like um there is like a game to all of this, even if it
Hmm.
is kind of a rigged game.
Yeah.
And you can crack it.
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
so yeah, I would tell people just to be like a student for a while
Hmm.
before they really start like trying to launch their careers, and
Hmm.
um kind of focus on craft and concept,
Hmm.
because if because at least in my experience, like those things really matter,
Hmm.
and really well written scripts have kind of this like compounding effect on your career where they're just like doing work for you while you're doing other things in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you do that work up front, once you get to LA or once you actually are in a writer's room, it
Mm-hmm.
will be so much easier.
I can't agree enough. That's that you see it all the time. Definitely people who are a little it's dangerous too because like, promoting yourself online, like it's very much like it's an ego thing. I do it all the time and it's like an ego thing. And I think that getting to into that ego thing way too early in your journey, like you said, it cannot be great. I think a good way to like stay humbled, maybe what I did, and maybe you did as well, because we talked about contests a little bit at that stage when you're focusing on just craft and concept and trying to be a better writer. Submit to contests, submit to the good ones, like, do your own research and find the three, four, five, six that are actually worth submitting to. But contests, for me, the thing that I liked about it, yes, you spend money, and yes, sometimes like it's you spend $60 just to get a letter that says no, we're good. And but it can really like kind of just give you a barometer of where you're at. Now, they're all subjective contests, and sometimes your script that won the nickel wouldn't even place in some tiny screenwriting contest, and you're like, what the hell? That stuff happens too. But I do think that like if you're consistently placing across some of these contests, you start to see like, okay, like I'm starting to get something here. Like many people are starting to agree that like this is a coherent story or whatever it is.
Yeah. My scripts
And
are
that can
meeting
help.
industry. Yeah. My scripts are meeting industry standards, at
Yeah.
least.
I do remember early on in my journey, the first time I placed in Screencraft, I was like,
Mhm.
wow, a real legitimate industry professional read this who works at a high level. And then you come to find out years later that it's like, oh, those are usually like college kids in like a screenwriting class reading the first round.
Yeah.
So that definitely humbled me to learn that. But it's like, yeah, you're right. Meeting industry standards. I think that's just a good way to like kind of track where you're at and maybe not get ahead of yourself and like, well, why don't I have an agent? And it's like, well, I mean, have you only written one feature and you're only on draft two? It's kind of not time yet. You gotta keep working at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And people will kind of tell you, like people will tell you when you're ready. Like
Yes. Yeah.
people will tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny because it when you first start writing, you feel like you're just submitting everything into the void. But I found that like once you get a little bit better, people are really honest about your work. Like they'll be
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
this is a good, like the when I wrote Bad Gandhi, I met several showrunners who were like, this is a staffing sample. I would staff you on this sample. You will probably get staffed in the next few months. And that was
Hmm.
crazy to hear because it felt like such an impossible hurdle that I was trying
Hmm.
to overcome. And
Hmm.
yet here were these people who were just like, yeah, this is going to happen. You've made it an inevitability. And
Hmm.
that's, and it had never happened before with a script, even
Hmm.
with the script that got me repped.
Yeah.
So it was just, it's weird.
I
But
was gonna
it's
ask.
also true.
Yeah, I was gonna ask real quick with Bad Gandhi. Do you remember how many original pilots you'd written at that point?
Bad Gandhi was my 11th script and
Okay.
my like fifth original pilot,
Okay. Yeah. So there
I
you go.
think, or in my sixth original pilot. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Because yeah, you get to a point where early on you're learning. Okay, here's structure. This is character, but it really needs to all come together, and it just takes
Yeah.
time, and it takes trying it with like six, seven different stories, different sets of characters, and yeah, it just takes a while. But
Yeah. And you can
I like.
only work on so many things at one time. Sorry. Yeah. Like
No,
I just,
no, you're totally right. Yeah. Right on. Okay, well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Honestly, I think people are going to get a lot of help out of this, especially TV focused people, because I never provide any assistance in that realm. So, TV focused writers will really enjoy your insight and experience. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
thanks for reaching out and
Mhm.
having me on and being patient about today.
Oh, for sure, for sure. All right, y'all. Episode 40 is in the books. I want to thank Shruti Saran for coming on the show and sharing a lot of wisdom about her TV writing origin story, where she's at now, what she's learned, and I think it's going to help out a lot of you. If you're interested in TV, and even if you're not, I know I learned a lot. It low-key made me want to go back and write another pilot. I've only written one 30-minute pilot ever, but I love half-hour comedies, so maybe that'll be something I do. If you like the episode, again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, say something smart that Shruti said, say something dumb that I said. You can do that on Twitter and Instagram too. If you're only listening at Social Writer Pod, you can go to our Linktree link in the bio. If you want to donate, give me a few bucks. I appreciate it. I'm not above begging on the internet. So that's about it, guys. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I hope you guys are just killing it. It is February 13th. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day. If you have a Valentine, I hope that you have a beautiful romantic day together. And if you're single like me, I hope it is a lonely, depressing, horrible day. No, I'm just kidding. We're already halfway through February, which is pretty insane. I hope you guys are just, taking care of business, getting things done. I hope the industry is getting back to normal. I hope that projects are actually being picked up. I think it's a pretty brutal time right now. Yeah, that's really all I got. I have nothing optimistic to say whatsoever, except that the Oscars are coming up, and you should go to a fun Oscar party if that's your thing. I think I'm going to this year, and it's going to be fun. That's it, guys. Take care of yourselves. I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
The Social Screenwriter